UFC 271 Adesanya versus Whittaker 2 takes place in only a couple of hours, and I'm going to go through my last minute detailed prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card. I'm not just saying who I believe is going to win. I did that earlier this week. I'm trying to call every single fight, exactly how it's going to go, what limb will be used for a KO, what submission will be achieved, what the scorecards are going to be if it goes to a decision, and just how every single minute of every round is going to play out. Let's start straight away with the early prelim opener of Jeremiah Wells versus Blood Diamond. Of course, the debut of Israel Adesanya's teammate. I think it's going to backfire on him, and I'm going to go with Jeremiah Wells by first round KO over Mike Mathetha. I do believe that Blood Diamond's going to be doing quite well to start this fight. I think he'll land a couple of good teep kicks, a couple of good straight shots on Jeremiah Wells, but Jeremiah Wells will take them quite well. No pun intended. And then he'll come back and land a big shot on Blood Diamond in the first round around the halfway point. And I think that's when Blood Diamond's energy is going to change a little bit. He's going to be like, oh my god, this guy's got some really big power. Can't get hit by this too often. He gets hit by it again, about a minute left to go in the first round, with about a minute left to go in the first round. Backs up against the cage. Tries to throw one of his unorthodox high kicks out of nowhere that he does quite a bit. I've watched his fights, I've watched his kickboxing matches as well. He throws like this lead leg high kick out of nowhere, and he keeps doing it, and it's very unorthodox, and it can catch people off guard quite a bit. But I think when he does this, Jeremiah Wells is going to track him down, land a big right hand as he's on one leg, and fold him off of a high kick in the first round, at the end of the first round against the cage. Jeremiah Wells gets it done by first round KO, ruining the debut of Israel Adesanya's teammate. Moving on up the card, Douglas Silva the Andrade versus Sergey Morozov. I'm going to go with Sergey Morozov by decision, and I'm going to go with him by decision by 29-27. Unanimous decision. I think he's going to lose the first round to Douglas Silva the Andrade. Andrade might land a couple of good shots. Sergey Morozov tries a couple of takedowns, but Andrade works his way out of them against the cage, lands some good shots to the body, they separate. Maybe Douglas Silva the Andrade is landing the better shots on the feet, but Sergey Morozov is still keeping up with him in terms of volume. But the meaningful shots that are going to be landed by Douglas Silva the Andrade, and I think that's what's going to decide the first round. Second round happens. Sergey Morozov still trying to get his takedowns early on. This time they're a little bit easier to achieve. He's starting to land some knees to the thigh. He's starting to take the back position against the cage, try and put a hook in, land a couple of punches as Douglas Silva the Andrade works his way back up to his feet. Then I do believe that Douglas Silva the Andrade is still going to be landing some decent shots in the second round. But in the second round again, Sergey Morozov is going to go back to his takedowns, achieve his takedowns, and start really keeping down Douglas Silva the Andrade. Whenever Douglas Silva the Andrade works his way back up, I think Morozov's going to have some knees to the body against the cage, some body shots for him in general. I think it's going to be a bit more even on the feet. Morozov starting to land some big shots. Silva the Andrade still landing his own big shots, but the grappling is going to be the difference in the second round. Morozov wins that one. The third round comes around, and I think Sergey Morozov's going to start to really wear on Douglas Silva the Andrade. Andrade will start to gas out, and Morozov will start beating him up on the ground, passing over into half guard, taking the back position, fighting for a rear naked choke, punching him from that position as well, controlling the entire round of his grappling, and also winning the moments on the feet as well to a 10-8 decision in the third round. And I think that's going to lead to a 29-27 decision to Sergey Morozov. Moving on up the card, AJ Dobson versus Jacob Malkoun. I'm going to go with Jacob Malkoun. I'm going to go with second round arm triangle submission to Jacob Malkoun. I think AJ Dobson's going to get into a massive firefight early on. I don't think he can help himself, so I do see this first part of this fight going very, very crazily. Maybe AJ Dobson lands a couple of big shots. Jacob Malkoun shoots a takedown underneath it, gets down Dobson for a second, but Dobson works his way back up. Jacob Malkoun sticks to him against a cage, keeps the body lock, starts looking for some sweeps and some trips, can't quite get them, but keeps AJ Dobson against a cage, fighting for underhooks, lands some good knees to the body, lands a couple of good shots on the break. AJ Dobson and him are at range again now, they've separated from the clinch. Dobson lands another good shot on Malkoun, Malkoun's backing up, ducks into something, gets hit again, but sticks on to AJ Dobson, gets a grip of him, pushes him against the cage again. Dobson's trying to fight it off. Jacob Malkoun gets like an inside trip against the cage. Down goes AJ Dobson. They start working their way back up to their feet. Malkoun's landing some decent shots on Dobson, really starting to wear him down. Then Dobson, after sort of going for a finish after rocking at Malkoun so many times, he's going to crack him again at the end of the round, try and get him out of there at the end of the first by swinging a bunch of crazy shots. Malkoun's going to land a really good shot back in the midst of all this flurry, and I think that Dobson's going to sort of overexert himself, going for a finish at the end of the first round. Second round's going to come around. Malkoun's a little bit beaten up. Dobson's feeling himself a little bit. He goes all out the gate at the start of the second round, looking for a big head kick, some big punches, some big swinging shots on Jacob Malkoun. Jacob Malkoun's going to back up against the cage again, duck underneath, get the takedown. You're going to see a look of disappointment on the face of AJ Dobson. He's been taken down again. Now Malkoun's in half guard on top, being a little bit of a wet blanket, landing some total strikes, couple of elbows here and there as well that are starting to sort of mark up the face of AJ Dobson, who's starting to look a little bit more defeated as the round goes on. Then at the end of the second round, I believe that AJ Dobson's going to give up a bad position. Jacob Malkoun's going to pass over his guard all the way over and get the arm triangle choke at the end of the second. Moving on up the card, Carlos Ulberg versus Fabio Cherant. This should be a quick one. I think Ulberg's going to win this one by check hook counter in the first round. I think there's not a it's not a coincidence that that's what William Knight landed on Fabio Cherant. I mean, Fabio Cherant leaves himself very vulnerable when he attacks, and I think that Carlos Ulberg's going to win this fight at range, and I think by winning this fight at range, it's not going to give Cherant an option but to try and go forward and attack. You know what I'm saying? So I think they're going to be... Cherant's going to be losing it at range, which means he's not going to be able to keep the patience that he wants to, because I think that Ulberg's going to be chopping at his legs, landing some really good jabs, keeping at range, staying more patient than he was in an Uzuchukwu fight, so it'll be a much slower paced fight, but he's starting to pick apart Cherant at range. Some good teeps to the body, some good leg kicks as well, really starting to chop hard with a couple of the leg kicks, and you can see that they're affecting Cherant. Cherant rushes in, looking for a big exchange. Ulberg cracks him with like a counter left hook. Down goes Cherant. Ulberg finishes him off with a really messy TKO to ground and pound finish, and I think Cherant's going to be done after that. Ulberg gets it done by first round KO on the counter. Moving on up the card, Alexander Hernandez versus Renato Moicano. I'm going to go with Alexander Hernandez by first round KO. I really am. I think they're going to get scrappy. I think Renato Moicano is going to get tagged by some decent shots early on by Alexander Hernandez, who's going to come straight out the trap, looking for that fake glove touch, front kick to the body type thing that he normally does. Renato Moicano is going to see like, yeah, I'm still here though, and he lands a couple of decent shots back on Hernandez. Then Hernandez sort of gets him against the cage with the pressure, front kicks him to the stomach, pushes him against the cage, looks to land like a big 1-2. Renato Moicano is going to duck underneath, get a takedown for a second, but Hernandez works his way back up. Then in the exchange, as they break, Hernandez is going to land a real nasty shot off the break, which he usually does in a lot of his fights if you watch him. As soon as they break from the clinch, I think Hernandez is going to land a really nasty hook on Moicano. Moicano's going to go stumbling backwards. Hernandez starts to tee off on him. Moicano shoots again, gets his head pounded in as Hernandez stuffs the takedown, who works his way back up to his feet. Still hurt against the cage. Moicano's backing up. Hernandez goes to the body. Moicano's hands come down. He tries trading back with Hernandez because he's hurt, and that's when he gets put down by Hernandez in the first round. I know no one likes Alexander Hernandez, but he's pretty good and he's very explosive. I'm picking him to get the first round KO in the upset. Moving on up the card, Mana Martinez versus Ronnie Lawrence. I'm going to go with Ronnie Lawrence by third round ground and pound TKO. I think is a pretty reasonable bet to make here. Mana Martinez being very patient early on. Ronnie Lawrence getting the better of him at range on the feet, moving in and out, using his good footwork, getting a couple of takedowns here and there, but again, he's not really a dominant wet blanket on top that's going to pin you down in half guard or anything like that. So I can see Mana Martinez using some Granby rolls, escaping a bunch of bad positions, trying to end up back on his feet, up against the cage, trying to break the grip of Ronnie Lawrence, who's kneeing at his thigh and foot stomping him a couple of times, landing some good shots on the break. That's going to go on for the first two rounds. Then in the third round, I think the takedowns are going to be a little bit harder to scramble for Mana Martinez. He's starting to slow down. Now Ronnie Lawrence is trying to take sort of full mount positions and back mount positions from his takedowns that he's achieved, and I think the resistance from Mana Martinez isn't going to be enough in those positions, and I think eventually Ronnie Lawrence will get full mount, land some big shots. Martinez will turn his back. Lawrence will continue to land big shots and get a third round TKO to ground and pound, in my opinion. Moving on up the card, William Knight versus Maxim Grishin. I'm going to go with William Knight by first round KO here. I think Maxim Grishin's going to be doing good early on. William Knight's going to miss a bunch of shots. Grishin's going to start to do really well, start to land a bunch of kicks at range, try and sort of pin the arms against the body of William Knight, because William Knight's a big power puncher. So I think Grishin's just going to be smashed smashing body kicks and head kicks into the arms, trying to keep the arms against William Knight and smash those forearms up a little bit. And I think as he's going for one of those, William Knight's going to tag him. He's going to get wobbled. They're going to recover. He's still going to be okay around the halfway point of the first round. Grishin goes in again to land some big shots, tries pushing up William Knight against the cage. I think William Knight's going to use like one of those weirdly athletic hip tosses that he has in his game. Flip Grishin to the ground for a second. Grishin's going to be trying to work his way back up. And I think that William Knight's going to KO him with little punches as he's trying to get back up on a single leg behind the ear area. Grishin's not moving. They call off the fight. A pretty uneventful and not so cool looking KO to William Knight in the first round. Moving on up the card. Alex Perez versus Matt Schnell. No longer on the fucking card. Moving on up the card. Roxanne Modaferri versus Casey O'Neill. I'm going to go with Casey O'Neill, and I'll go with Casey O'Neill by rear naked choke. I would normally say TKO or something like that, but I believe that Roxanne Modaferri, with her last fight on her contract, she's not going to be looking to take too much brain damage. So if it does get to a point where she is being pounded out, she knows it's her last fight. I don't think she's going to choose to keep taking that punishment. And I think there will be a moment where she just gives up her neck and gives up the rear naked choke to Casey O'Neill. I think it's going to be a very patient first round. Modaferri crashing forward, pushing her against the cage. Casey O'Neill turns it around against the cage, lands a couple of good knees. They're both looking very fucking terrible on the feet because they're women's flyweights. And I think eventually Roxanne Modaferri is going to get taken down against the cage. Casey O'Neill ends up on top. Lands some really good ground and pound, swells up the eye of Roxanne Modaferri. They're both back on their feet. Second round happens. Same thing again against a cage. Modaferri controlling it at first, but O'Neill landing all the damaging shots with the punches and some of the knees against the cage as well. O'Neill turns it around, gets her takedown again. Down goes Roxanne Modaferri. O'Neill passes into half guard, lands some decent shots. Modaferri tries a hip escape, gives up full mount because of this by giving up that space. O'Neill gets on top, lands some big shots. Roxanne Modaferri tries to scramble, turn her back, and then big pounding shots from Casey O'Neill to the back of the ear area of Roxanne Modaferri, who then gives up the rear naked choke because she realizes it's her last fight, and Casey O'Neill gets a rear naked choke finish in the second round. Moving on up the card, Andrei Arlovski versus Jared Vanderaa. I'm going to predict a very, very boring 30-27 decision to Andrei Arlovski. I think that Jared Vanderaa is going to try and get a bit wild early on, and I think that's going to lead to him slowing down a little bit, and I think that's going to lead to Andrei Arlovski just picking him apart as the rounds go on. I've never seen Arlovski go for a finish. Maybe ever. Like, there are some moments in his career, of course, against Travis Brown where he gets lured into a brawl and he'll go for a finish if it's there, but I just recently don't see Andrei Arlovski going for any finishes, so I will say decision win for Andrei Arlovski. I just don't think Jared Vanderaa is good enough, so I think Arlovski's going to be chopping at his calf, landing some good teep kicks to the body, landing some really good jabs at range, moving around very well for the 3 rounds, and I just don't think Jared Vanderaa has the conditioning or cardio to last into those later rounds. Maybe he makes the first round interesting by landing a couple of big shots, but I think Arlovski's just going to pick him apart at range for 3 rounds and get the job done that way. Moving on up the card, Bobby Green versus Nasrat Haqparast. I'm going to go with Bobby Green by 30-26 decision. I think it's going to be Bobby Green picking apart Nasrat at range in the first 2 rounds, but Nasrat still giving him some decent shots back. Some couple of good punches from Nasrat are going to land. Bobby Green's going to back up a little bit, but overall in those first 2 rounds, I think we're going to see Bobby Green landing the more effective strikes at range, landing more of the shots at range, starting to swell up the eye of Nasrat Haqparast as well. That teep to the body is going to be money for Bobby Green as well, in my opinion, and I think he's going to be chopping at the legs a couple of times, which you don't typically see from Bobby Green. I think that's going to be quite effective. I think he's going to start landing his 1-2 a little bit more, start to mock Nasrat Haqparast towards the end of the second round because he's already been comfortably outstriking him. Nasrat's going to start to slow down. The teep to the body starting to work for Bobby Green. He's starting to rip the body a bit more at the end of the second round. Third round happens. Nasrat's starting to get a little bit beaten up a bit. Swollen eye, lip busted, body really hurting, starting to slow down, cardio's been drained. Bobby Green, even first half of the round. Nasrat tries to keep him honest, tries to land some big shots back of his own. Eventually those big shots are going to start to lose their sting. Green's going to start taking advantage of this, landing more of his own big shots, and he's going to start beating the shit out of Nasrat Haqparast in the end of the third round. If he can do it to Fiziev in certain moments, I'm not saying he beat him up the whole time, but he had a really good third round against Fiziev, so I can see him having an equally good third round here against Nasrat Haqparast. Oh yeah, judge gave that to Fiziev. Wow, nothing to see here. No corruption here, guys. Bobby Green is going to win the third round by 10-8, beating the shit out of Nasrat, and he's going to get rewarded for toughness. And maybe this could be a fight of the night, who knows. I'm going with Bobby Green 30-26, my man Bobby Green. Moving on up the card, Kyler Phillips versus Marcelo Rojo. I'm going to go with Kyler Phillips by 29-28 decision. I think Kyler Phillips is going to win himself the first 2 rounds. I think he's going to look untouchable in the first round. I think it's going to be a very dominant round for him. Not enough for a 10-8 in my opinion, but I think maybe one judge gives it a 10-8, so we could see like a 29-28 Phillips, 29-28 Phillips to a 29-27 Phillips or something like that on the scorecards. Kyler Phillips landing big shots, landing good head kicks on Marcelo Rojo, slamming kicks into the body, landing some good kicks at the legs as well. Starting to pick apart Marcelo Rojo in the first round, and you can see Rojo, who's been out for a while, having a bit of trouble getting his timing and his range. Then eventually, Marcelo Rojo's going to try and do a bit better in the second round, land some decent body shots on Kyler Phillips, but Phillips will still be landing the bigger shots. It'll be a competitive round in the second, but I think Kyler Phillips is going to do way better in the big shot department. Start landing some big ones on Rojo with the hands, on the chin. Rojo gets stumbled back a little bit at one of the moments, still finds his way back into the fight. They're clinching for a little bit. Phillips ends up on top, lands a couple of ground and pound shots. Rojo scrambles, ends up on a single leg of his own, pushing Phillips against the cage. They're fighting against the cage towards the end of the second round. At the end of the second round, Rojo's going to start tuning up the body of Phillips against the cage, in my opinion. Then in the third round, Phillips is going to start doing well in the first minute. In the second minute, you can see him starting to slow down a little bit on the feet, and Rojo's getting a bit better, landing a few more good body shots. Then in the third minute of the third round, I think Phillips is going to start shooting takedowns, getting them, but Rojo's going to work his way back up to his feet. Then in the fourth minute of the third round, I think Phillips is going to start failing some panic takedowns because he's starting to slow down and his gas tank ain't working too well. And as he's getting back up, Rojo's going to be kneeing him in the body, landing some good body shots in general, starting to track him down against the cage. Now it's time for Rojo to start winning the round for himself. Big shots from Rojo, combination punches against the cage. Phillips trying to get wild with some head kicks, ends up on the ground. Rojo's on top, landing big ground and pound shots. The fight's over. Third round to Marcelo Rojo. First 2 rounds to Kyler Phillips. 29-28 in my opinion, in a great fight. Maybe that'll be fight tonight. Who knows? Moving on up the card, Jared Cannonier versus Derek Brunson. I'm going to go with a sort of hugging match from Derek Brunson in the first round. I think he's going to take down Cannonier against the cage, be at his hips, try and drag him to the canvas, maybe have some good positions of half guard, and Cannonier's going to work his way out of it, back to full guard, take a couple of ground and pound shots, roll over back to his knees against the cage. Brunson's still on top, trying to get the body lock, trying to drag him back down towards the canvas, but Cannonier's working his way back up, landing some really good knees to the body, which I think are going to be very effective. Brunson's kneeing the thigh a couple of times. Cannonier's looking to land some elbows after framing off of Brunson against the cage. Brunson's still trying to stick to him like glue. They separate. Little bit of a patient striking match at the end of the first round. Knowing there's about a minute left in the first round, Cannonier's going to land a bunch of good leg kicks. I think then in the second round, Brunson's going to be a bit more open to strike a little bit with Cannonier, to feel it out on the feet a bit more. Land some decent shots on Cannonier. Fuck's sake, man. Cannonier's still landing some decent shots back. And I think he's going to hurt Brunson a couple of times in the second round. Brunson's still trying to stick to him like glue, get the takedown against the cage, try and do the body lock, and eventually, I think Cannonier is going to land a big shot on Brunson in the second, start to wobble him a little bit, leading to some panic takedowns from Brunson that he might get for a moment, put himself into half guard on bottom, land some decent shots on Cannonier, but Cannonier's going to stay calm. Maybe Brunson at one point has the back, but Cannonier's sort of like okay with it. He's accepting it. He's got 2-on-1. He's fighting the sort of positioning of the legs to stop the hooks from going in, stop the body triangle occurring. Then he's going to end up on top at the end of the second, land some good shots on Brunson. Brunson works his way back up to his feet. Cannonier's landing some big knees to the body against the cage, and they're still stuck against each other in the clinch against the cage. Then the third round happens. Brunson gets a couple of takedowns stuffed. More big knees from Cannonier after he stuffs the takedown. Couple of big shots on the feet. Then Brunson goes in for a 1-2 with his chin wide up in the air. And I think Cannonier's going to catch him with a left hook counter, put him down badly, finish him off with ground and pound. Brunson's going to be done at the end of the third round by TKO to Cannonier. Moving on up the card, Derek Lewis versus Tuivasa. I'm going to go with Derek Lewis by first round KO. I think it's going to be absolutely crazy. I think both guys are going to land big shots early. I think Lewis is going to get hit with a bunch of massive calf kicks off Tuivasa, and I think he's going to do some jumping switch kicks to try and negler sort of, what even is the word for that? I don't even know what the word would be for that. But either way, he's going to try and stop that from happening. Okay? And I think when he does that, he's going to do it by jumping switch kicks to try and keep his feet off the ground. A couple of big high kicks from Derek Lewis at range as well that are going to miss. Tuivasa is going to sort of chuckle to himself. They're both going to land some big shots. I think at first, Tuivasa is going to crack Derek Lewis with a big blow. Lewis is going to get rocked a bit and start to back up. Tuivasa comes crashing in, chops at the calf again against the cage, hurts Lewis with the calf kick. You can see Lewis is like, oh shit, it's not going too well for me. Tuivasa goes in for like a big elbow in the clinch, lands it, misses it kind of though, but sort of lands it off the shoulder. Lewis smothers against the cage. Tuivasa separates, looks for the calf kick again, but misses. Lewis lands a big shot as Tuivasa comes in for a hook of his own. Down goes Tuivasa while Lewis's back is against the cage, and it looks like it's going to be bad for Lewis. I think he randomly lands a big blow out of nowhere on Tuivasa, wobbles the legs of Tuivasa, who then crumples in on himself on the ground, and then Lewis ends up on top, lands a couple of ground and pound shots, and walks off afterwards. First round KO for Derek Lewis. Moving on to the main event, Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker. I'm going to go with a decision for Israel Adesanya here. I don't see him getting a finish, not because I don't think he's better than he was in the first fight, but just I think that Whittaker's going to be a lot more patient, and I think Whittaker's going to be more open to the idea of losing by decision than losing by KO in certain moments. I don't think Whittaker's going to take the same chances to try and finish Israel Adesanya if he's not winning on the scorecards already. And I mean, I think Whittaker's going to be more okay to sort of oblige accepting losing some rounds so long as he makes it to a decision in a way. I think he's going to be a little bit patient early on. Both guys are going to be patient. Adesanya's going to win a leg kick battle at range. Maybe Whittaker lands better shots with the hands. A couple of jabs to the body. A couple of stiff jabs in general on Israel Adesanya. I think he's going to throw a much more straight selection of shots in terms of his striking rather than the looping ones that he usually was throwing in the first fight that they had. And I think he's going to start following that up with the head kick that's going to miss a couple of times. Adesanya's going to rear back from the head kick, and then once Whittaker plants his foot back down, Adesanya chops at the legs a couple of times as well. Adesanya chewing up the legs early on, Whittaker doing a bit better with the boxing early on. Adesanya wins the round, the leg kicks are a bit more effective, and I think that's going to be how the first round goes. The second round happens. I think first round Adesanya. Second round, Whittaker's going to start taking a bit more chances. I think he lands a few more shots on Adesanya. He's going to start to fight on the inside, ripping some body shots, but Adesanya's going to win at that game as well, landing a good shot on Whittaker that sort of buckles him a bit, but he's going to be fine. Then I think Adesanya's going to start thinking, oh, here I go, feinting all over the place, lifting up his lead leg, the kind of stuff that Adesanya does, feinting a little bit, trying to track down Whittaker against the cage. I think as he does this, Whittaker's going to go for a 1-2 lunging shot. Adesanya's going to look for a counter hook. As he goes for the counter hook, Whittaker's going to get a body lock on the in the grappling department, get a body lock, sort of sweep Adesanya to the ground into half guard. Whittaker locks down half guard, lands total strikes until the end of the round, and I think that's going to win Whittaker back the round, even though he was in a bit of trouble early on. So I think it's going to be 1-1 going into the third. Then the third round happens. I think Adesanya's still chopping at the leg kicks. Whittaker trying to land jabs at range, trying to be a bit more patient. Adesanya's going to start landing some good front kicks to the body and stuff like that. A couple of good head kicks are going to get blocked by Whittaker, and I think Whittaker's going to start landing his own head kicks, a couple of leg kicks of his own, a couple of oblique kicks that look like they might affect Israel Adesanya, and Whittaker's starting to do really well, and I think Adesanya's going to leg kick him a couple of times again, and I think Whittaker's going to get another takedown in the third round, end up on top, and start landing some decent shots on Adesanya towards the end of the third. It's not looking good for Adesanya. It's 2-1 Robert Whittaker going into the fourth round, and I think the leg kicks are going to start to add up, and they're going to come into play in the fourth round. Whittaker's not bouncing around the same way he should be. He's getting a bit more of an adrenaline dump because this is his big fight, and oh my god, I'm winning it. I'm winning the rematch against Adesanya. I'm going to get my belt back. Adesanya starts landing more leg kicks. You can see they're starting to affect Robert Whittaker. Some more front kicks to the body. Adesanya's starting to sort of beat Whittaker to the jab now, win the boxing exchanges a bit more because Whittaker can't really plant his weight on his lead leg. Adesanya landing really good shots on the feet now. Whittaker's starting to worry a little bit. You can see it on him. He gets a takedown towards the end of the fourth round, ends up sort of on top. top, tries to pass over into full mount. Adesanya rolls over. Whittaker puts hooks in on the back. I think Adesanya gets 2-on-1, turns it around, ends up on top, starts landing some big shots on Whittaker on top at the end of the 4th round after escaping his back being taken. And I think Adesanya wins the 4th round because of that. Then the 5th round, I think Adesanya's going to have more success landing good shots on the feet. The leg kicks are still working early on. Whittaker shoots for a takedown, but Adesanya's going to scramble it. They're both going to sort of lose the positioning of the grappling and end up getting back up to their feet towards the halfway point of the 5th round. Adesanya's starting to land some really good jabs. Adesanya lands a good hook on Whittaker, who's trying to get the round back for himself because he's being outstruck at range. Sort of rocks Whittaker a little bit, and Whittaker's going to do that thing where he touches his lead calf with his rear foot. If you've ever seen that, he always does that shit when he gets hit with a decent shot to sort of like snap himself back into it. I don't know why he does it, but he sort of snaps his rear foot into like the calf of his lead leg. Does it quite a bit in fights, so I think he's going to start doing that, which is going to be a tell for Adesanya, like, oh, I kind of cracked him with that shot. I'm going to go for him again. Good shot from Adesanya again. Whittaker sort of moving a bit more on the outside, like, oh, fuck, he's actually kind of got me a bit here. Shoots in for another takedown, pushes Adesanya up against the cage, knees him to the fire a couple of times, tries to throw him, but Adesanya's going to keep his balance, get back out, separate. Whittaker lands a couple of big shots on the feet. They stand there. At the end of the 5th round, Adesanya's done a bit more. Whittaker's done okay towards the end, and I think Adesanya's going to win this fight 3 rounds to 2 and keep his middleweight world championship by decision 48-47. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye. I'm ill as fuck, but we're going to do it anyway. I'll be there for the fight companion later. Goodbye.